shall we begin? Hare?
Hare.
Okay. So we are back with the thinking hat, and on the last episode we actually spoke about an important topic, which was how to face interviews and about workplace cultures.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we are two people short this time around.
Yeah.
They're probably still on the way. We are not really sure what happened to them at all. Cops might be looking for them for all we know.
True.
Yeah, so today our topic is going to be... No, that's just... Okay. What are we going to talk about actually? So initially the idea was to talk about free speech and how it connects to different areas of focus. Shall we continue with that and just talk about whatever the fuck we want?
Sure. And we should also remember that at the time we are recording this, there is a virus spreading across the world.
Yeah.
And 41 people, I think, are dead already. And, this is... It's one of those times where scientists' brains and all that is tested.
Yeah, interesting story, Mashan. So I'm not hoping that this is gonna turn into a zombie apocalypse or something like that. But no, you know what? Actually, I am, because
What?
so this is the thing, right? So when these attacks happened in April last year, I can be a little paranoid sometimes, right? What is it? Okay. Alright, so you know how I can be a little paranoid sometimes. So I spoke to my father and I made him a bit paranoid as well. And you know where our garage is, right? The one joining the road, right? So under that we built a small shelter.
What?
Which no one knows, right? So just in case there is a zombie apocalypse, you guys are most welcome.
Thank you. Is there space for all?
There's a mini fridge. There's space for about 8 people.
My God.
Right? There's a small mini fridge with some chocolates inside and some energy bars and shit.
Is
So
Jeevaka invited?
Couple of beers. Jeevaka is most definitely not invited. I don't think he'll fit in. Okay, so we forgot to mention. So behind scenes we have Jeevaka today, and he's our tech guy. He has been for the longest time.
Yeah.
And I think you can see some... I mean, if you watched last week's episode, there were some obvious technical difficulties that we faced.
We hired the best bugger we knew to get it done this time, right?
Yeah, so this time obviously it's going to be 10-20 times better.
Yep, hopefully.
Yeah, so okay, the topic. We'll be talking about free speech, right? So we will start with that.
Alright.
I have a few ideas. Shall I begin?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay, so when it comes to these topics, usually, even with last week's topic, I think I kind of had the most controversial opinion, as always. I don't think I'm trying to be that on purpose. It's just that when I look at certain topics, my point of view is always from the philosophical or the scientific, so rather than the political, right?
Right.
And I just... generally something that I really hate is to be politically correct. Like I actively try not to be politically correct. Sometimes it can be very annoying to people, but I know
we know from last week experience.
Yeah, right. So
no one like the LGBTQ ABCD.
So no, I'm not saying that I'm like a extreme right-wing person. What's a...
It's been cold. Bloody cold. Right, anyway, sorry. Bro.
You can...
Yeah. Give me the...
Western.
Yeah. Next year. Sunday. Alright, okay.
Anyway, as I was saying... So as I was saying, I'm not trying to be that, but I just happen to have a very different point of view on these topics. So when it comes to free speech, right... there's this Canadian professor who's also a clinical psychologist. I think I showed you a video sometime back. The Kathy Newman video, Channel 4, right? When he was asked about free speech, he basically said that in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive, right? And what he basically meant by that was, so that quote of his was something that really resonated with me, and then something that I really thought about for days and days, right? So he said, let me say it again. So he said, in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive, right? So basically what he meant by that was, just take any situation where you talk about an important topic, right? It can be with your wife, your girlfriend, your close friends, with your lecturers, your students, whatever, right? Your employees,
Yeah.
your employer, right? Whatever important topic you talk about, where you want to reach a common consensus or where you want to change a particular thing for the better, you will end up for sure offending one party or the other, right?
Definitely,
You just
yeah.
can't have
Make
a
everyone happy.
discussion.
Yeah.
You can't make everyone happy, and you just can't have an important discussion or a debate without offending at least one particular party, and that's exactly what he meant by that. So,
Sure.
right? So, now obviously, when it comes down, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be actively offensive towards the person that you are debating or discussing the topic with, right? Obviously, you have to be a bit empathetic towards, respectful, obviously, right? And obviously, like, it depends on the person. Like, some people are obviously more sensitive than the others, right? Depends on the person that you are debating with as well. Something you should consider when you are having the discussion, right?
Dumi is very sensitive.
Dumi, yeah, overly sensitive.
Overly sensitive.
So when you talk with people like Dumi, you have to really watch what you say, and maybe have a box of tissues next to you.
Adalepa, bro.
It's gonna be fine, bro. Just assure him, tap his back and
Your girlfriend is not going to leave you.
No, she's not. So you should like really. I mean, it's not about being offensive towards the person you're having the debate or the discussion with. It's more about caring more about the facts rather than the feelings.
Yeah.
At that given time, right? That's basically what he meant. And then there is this another famous, I think, journalist, YouTuber. I don't know what he is. I think he's also Professor Ben Shapiro. He has this famous saying that goes, "Facts don't care about your feelings."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So some shit like that, right? And again, even with that quote, I don't think he really meant that you have to be offensive towards.
So that's after he called that transgender person. Yeah.
Right. I think he could have handled that situation better. I think he was actually.
I mean, again, it comes to the point where, like, if you bring that whole context to Sri Lanka, where we are from, we understand that when we sort of debate, we don't really necessarily care about the other person. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, we come up with a set of, like, for example, it stems from the highest places of our country, the parliament, the politicians, and all of that. They have their opinion, they have their points and facts and figures, and irrelevant of whether the other person is contributing or arguing or bringing irrelevant points doesn't matter to this person. They would just, continue to ramble, because I mean, that's, I think, has to do a lot with education.
Sure.
I mean,
for sure.
And that self-discipline sort of to respect whoever you're speaking to. And I have, maybe it's unfair to say everyone is like that, but I haven't seen anyone who really sort of has a very intellectual type of debate or lets someone express their feelings. And then obviously comes the media, and then they are also.
We'll be obviously touching that topic for sure.
And then I'll get offended.
So that's exactly my point. One party
Parties
or the
will
other
get offended.
is gonna get offended at the end of the day when you're having an important discussion where you want to make a change to a certain thing that you believe is not right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now the thing is, there's another option, which is the only other option if free speech was not allowed, let's say. It's to remain in silence, and that hasn't worked for human beings when you look at evolution, right?
Yeah,
Obviously.
I mean, Madan, the thing is, like, there was this interesting point that I read somewhere where, for example, this whole telephone, we have to touch on politics here. These telephone conversations of former State Minister Ranjan Ramanayak. Now these damn things are released, right? Everyone was affected, actresses, all sorts of nonsense. And then came this status where now, okay, he's trying to get at politicians, he's trying to get at people who are in power, and then people who are not in power but people who are doing day-to-day jobs like us got affected by it. Like, journalists were removed from their jobs, there were people
Sure.
were trying to get divorces and all unnecessary nonsense. But the idea there was, the initial idea, the concept of it was, now someone has recorded you speaking, right? Which is unethical,
Sure.
right? Okay, and then he has decided to put it in a CD and keep it for his or whatever, right? But the idea was the main objective of holding on to this and bringing this out into the forefront was the fact that people were now scared to speak to other people over the phone. Like I've had to have that experience. They're like, "Ado record karanna nahi macha," right?
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that would, in relation, lead to a situation where people don't share facts and figures over the phone,
Sure.
right? Like there would be this fear, this sort of intimidated nature of the people, which would result in what? At the end of the day, this would result in a very autocratic sort of situation where people's voices are subdued. The only reason people share information is due to anonymity. Like you wouldn't be comfortable in telling someone else something if your face and your name and all that and where you work is going to be, you know what I mean? So when that happens, and if people are not available to share information that are important for the general public, what would happen? Whoever is in power and whoever wants to suppress those information will be able to do so very comfortably,
Right.
and no one will have a problem with that. And it is almost leading to that right now because of what we saw. And from time to time we have seen, unnecessary things coming on the internet. We how many like clips of porn have we seen in our lifetimes where it's unnecessary. But these types of things must have a wider implication because they affect not just that individual personality or the group of people that are involved, but the whole status quo. Because then at the end of the day, now we are dealing with we can debate on the fact whether now we are going into an autocracy. I'm not trying to bring President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and anything like that. I'm just...
No, I kind of sensed a little conspiracy hidden in your argument, but like that was just me.
Yeah.
Right, but from I never thought of that perspective.
Yeah, I'm speaking in very general terms.
Yeah. But no, that's actually a very interesting way to look at it. I never actually thought of it that way, so that's interesting. Yeah, you're right. I think you have a very good point there. I mean, look at what's happened now.
Yeah.
So people are, like you said, afraid to call people, afraid to.
Yeah, and if see now, again. We'll come back to our main argument, freedom of speech. So, let's say, for example, I was in Parliament and I did the exact same thing in the exact order of things how Ranjan Ramanayake did it.
Yeah.
And I didn't get caught. Right. Basically, he got caught because there was a weapon at his house and the police went and all sorts of things. The facts and figures is not what I'm trying to highlight here, but the ideology behind all of this, right? To a normal human being watching from outside, it was just a day-to-day day for Ranjan Ramanayake, where cops came and you saw the whole drama. But if you look at it from a sort of a bit of a speculative, bit of a sort of a investigative eye, you can see that this wasn't done in isolation. It was planned properly. He was arrested for something else, and then the CDs. Then, have you seen the frequency of how these things get released? They get released in a very systematic order. Someone is controlling it.
Sure.
So my theory is that people are doing. So there are various ways of instilling fear, and fear is an important factor. We've watched 100 movies, read so many books about how various societies drive fear and intimidation into the society to have control. We've seen this. We've debated on this. We discussed this. And I think this is Sri Lanka's unique way of intimidating its own people. That's just my view.
Yeah. So clearly, Sri Lankans are starting to realize the power that social media has on the country itself, right? Definitely. And its people. And cyberspace is now the opted form of attack for whatever. You're attacking. Anyway, so I think cyberspace is a more effective platform in that sense to subdue or instill fear in people, like you mentioned, rather than just using legislature or the judiciary or whatever you call it.
Absolutely.
Well versed with the law. This is why we need Dumi or not Dumi here today. Unfortunately, we don't have him with us.
What do you think he's doing at what do you think the bug
That's
is doing?
interesting. So I called the bug in the morning, and he said he didn't say he was on his way, but he said he wanted me to pick him up.
And we did go to his house.
We did
I
go to
mean,
his house.
I think the people who are watching and listening to this should know
Yeah.
that today is Saturday.
Yeah.
We're recording things on a Saturday, and after the Friday night,
Yeah.
I mean, we were, out there, and
Yeah.
he could have woken up and
And
come.
Dubey was not in his house, but
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it was locked from outside.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this.
What could have happened?
For all we know, this could be our next week's topic.
What
What happened to
What
Dubey?
happened to Dewey?
Where is he?
We are not doing.
Who is doing? Has it been Y2N?
Oh.
What conspiracy is this? Anyway, it's a whole other topic.
So yeah, coming back. Let's. We were at an interesting place. Now we spoke about
Yeah.
what Sri Lanka is in terms of
Mm.
free media and all of that. Now, I can't be speaking about this. There's a conflict of interest. But
Sure,
in your opinion,
Yeah.
what role does the media of Sri Lanka play when it comes to ensuring the people's freedom?
Okay,
to
so Machang, I personally stopped watching televised news about 10 years ago, right? And the reason for that was one day I had there was a period where I was suddenly taking interest in news, and I was watching the local channels,
Right.
the famous local channels on TV, right? And then I switched on a particular news channel one day, and then
God, it's not us.
there was a no, actually it wasn't yours. And then they played a particular clip of a politician speaking on an important topic, right? And the clip was about 20 seconds long, and then soon after the clip ended, and the clip ended prematurely. You could say it was so obvious, and it was cut and chopped from all sorts of ends. And then suddenly the presenter came up, and then the presenter started explaining what the politician said, right? So I didn't get to actually see the politician's point of view. Rather, the presenter gave his own opinion, own point of view on what the politician said.
Right.
And then I realized, okay, this is it. I'm not going to watch televised news anymore. Because the very same day, I was curious, so I went on YouTube, and luckily enough, the entire clip was there, which was 25 minutes long, right? And then to see what the politician said was a completely different story to what the presenter said. The summary that the presenter gave was a completely different story to what the politician actually said in the unedited video, right? So for that reason, I think I moved away from televised news a long time ago, and I know that YouTube is actually a quite reliable source in the sense that you get to decide on your own, right? There are certain channels that cut and chop according to their own agendas, but then also I think 80-85% there are unedited videos where you get the whole discussion on a particular topic by a person of interest, a politician, whoever it is, right? So so I basically switched to Facebook and YouTube for watching news, and I completely gave up on TV. So I hardly watch TV anymore unless.
Would you advise that for other people, though?
Definitely, for sure.
Why?
Unedited, unadulterated news that is not raped, basically by different news channels who got into their own agendas. So that was my opinion. That was my argument for giving up on televised news, because then I get to select what I want to watch as well.
Right.
Let's say, okay, I hear a particular I hear some news about a particular thing of interest, and then I go search it on YouTube, and then I get the entire story laid out for me.
Right.
So I think the world, and especially our country now in general, is moving out of televised news. You can see that happening. You can physically touch it and feel that happening, right? They are moving out of televised news into social media, because on a subconscious level, some people are realizing that on social media you get the news unfiltered and not tampered with, right? So that's basically my idea of information, of receiving information that I want to receive.
Sure.
Right. So I don't think that the televised news will go extinct anytime soon. I mean, people, like especially our parents, our grandparents, our uncles and aunts are still interested and very much invested. But you know what? Something interesting. I saw very recently that my father, who was a big fan of watching the 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and the 9 o'clock evening news of all these different channels, is now watching news on YouTube.
Right.
He has not moved out of the televised news.
But he's watching
He's
it on.
watching both.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I'll give him about 6 months to move out of televised news.
Sure. Because it's easier, convenient.
I can feel that happening. I can see that happening, right? I
Right.
can predict it like nothing else. So I think that was actually one of the reasons that we actually started the thinking it as well, right? So the main idea was initially to talk about news items, but then we are not, cornered into a box.
Yeah. We just
We can pretty much talk about anything like do me or not do me, for example. So like, I mean, why be cornered into a box, right? So that's the other thing. So on YouTube, you can pretty much say whatever the fuck you want, right? It doesn't matter who you offend. It doesn't matter what you say or how you say it, right? And moving a little away from the question you asked me, when it comes to freedom of speech, I think now, for example, let's say you say something about the government. Certain governments, certain states have the right to apprehend you, detain you, whatever it is, right? Try you in court. And certain governments don't. For example, US government, I think there's what do you call it? Article number 1 or like something, right? That gives you the right of speech. That basically
First Amendment.
That's one, right? So basically, if you do say something against the government, you can't try them unless you actually do work for the government.
No,
right?
you can't try them, period.
Yeah.
But if you're working for a company or
No. So like, what if a person working for the government says something bad about? Still, they can't, right? So the First Amendment covers that as well.
yeah.
Okay, great.
So
But if you're
First
working for
Amendment
like,
is freedom of speech. They can do anything that
Mm.
is, they can express themselves in any way, and the government cannot take action on you. Let's say, for example, we were working at this institution. This institution has a disciplinary sort of mechanism. They can take action.
They can.
But
And you can't stop them from doing that. But they can't also stop you from saying something against them. For example, if you were my boss, I can say, you fucker, I hate you, right?
Yeah.
You can fire me, but you can't stop me from calling
Saying,
you a fucker,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's basically the point.
I mean,
So
that's probably the case in Sri Lanka. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you tell someone something, and then obviously there are repercussions and consequences that you have to live up to or bear up or whatever you call it. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily stop you from doing anything. But the government is a different story. You don't have that protection. So this is why there are things that the West world has given to the other side, and there are things that are good and bad. So I was there for a while, and we were studying this exact same thing that you're speaking about, and how important it is for countries like us to handle it. But then again, it comes to the point where one can question: are we there yet? Are we at that level where we can basically do whatever the hell we want? Like, we've been to New York, right? So how that place is, right? Like, it's the place where most number of languages are spoken in one city, right? People from all around the world are there, and absolutely weird shit keeps happening in that place. Like, every time I've been there, I've seen like weird things happening. Yeah, so we've seen these things that are given by the West to the other part of the world, like democracy and stuff like that. There are good things, there are bad things, there are very, very bad things. But again, it comes to the point where we touched upon this earlier as well. Is the country like us, are we ready to have that much of freedom? Is that freedom in the first place? Right? It's like you go into a buffet, and when you see like so many options, you have a problem.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's when it's like rice, noodles, and something else, it's easier.
Yeah.
When there are 100 types of rice, you're like, what do I do now? That sort of thing. Are we ready? I might be thinking in a very narrow way. I don't know. But are we ready? Is the question that I want to raise, and I'm telling this because every time I've been to America, to New York especially, it's a weird place, right? Lots of things happening. I mean, there are people walking naked on the road.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like people taking pictures of naked people.
Mm.
Imagine that happening in Sri Lanka. Just put your mind there. It's not a pleasant sight. It's gross.
Sure.
Right, and that they call it freedom of expression. It's you know, it's America living the dream.
Yeah.
And are we ready to go there yet? Like, we have our culture, we have those barriers are there.
Mm.
I mean, they're good.
Sure.
Those barriers are good.
Yeah.
The
It works both ways.
It works both ways.
Yeah.
That's the correct way to put it. And then again, if for example things like what is happening right now happen.
Mm.
Initially, Ranjan would have been in prison for privacy,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
And then he would have. It would have been a different way. Things would have gone in a different way if we had those. So again, as you said, it has both its ways. It has a good side and a bad side. But again, I'm going to take you back. Are we ready? Is all I'm asking. And personally, I don't think we are. I don't know what you think.
I mean, you asked me that question right now. At the moment, I would give pretty much the same answer. But I'm trying to work my mind around the reasons why I'm saying that.
Right.
And the very first thing that's coming into my head right at the top is basically it might be a very stupid reason as to why we are not ready for it, but like maturity. Maturity as a population, right? I'm not saying the Americans, the New Yorkers have mature in thinking more than Sri Lankans.
No, it's the diversity there, bro. It's the it's
so
a lot of people.
Yeah, the other thing is I was thinking of those different group identities and how they come together, right? For example, I think the Canadian Prime Minister said some years ago that they are trying to work across all these different group identities that exist in Canada, right? The problem, the way I see it, the only reason that there is war, there is conflict in the world is because of separate group identities. It's not tribalism per se. I mean, it was tribalism initially,
Yeah.
but then now tribalism has kind of converted into group identities, right?
Yeah.
Whether
Nationalities,
it's the
race.
Americans versus the Muslims,
Yeah, yeah.
the terrorists, I don't know what exactly, but so it's very difficult to bring, a different set of groups who have different ideals, different beliefs, different set of rules into a common space, right? Obviously now think of Canada, right? So the Muslim population, they have their own rules. The French population, the Indians, they have their own set of values and rules, right?
Yeah.
But they still follow the common set of rules established by Canada, the
Right.
Canadian government, right?
Right.
And it's not an easy thing to do,
Definitely.
right? So I don't know to what extent that will succeed, because that's a very tricky subject. It's philosophical, it's scientific, it's political, it's all the above. So it's very hard to say like to what extent we can successfully bring together group identities under a common consensus. I don't know if that will ever happen, as long as there are different group identities that exist in the world,
Yeah.
right? But I think we are slowly getting there. I mean, I can see certain cultures, adapting to the ever-changing world, right? Certain religions adapting to the ever-changing world, and certain religions not adapting to it. But see, like, that's, I think, a core principle as human beings. We need to sort of update ourselves, renew ourselves as we go along. Every 10 years, every 20 seconds, we need to rethink our ideals, right? For example, like 500 years ago, people believed that the earth was flat, right? The scholars at that time, the scientists at that time believed that they knew for a fact that the earth was flat, right? And now we know for a fact that it isn't, right? So what will we know tomorrow, right? People might come and say some shit like it's a fucking hexagon, right? We wouldn't know, right? And we would believe that might be the fact of tomorrow, right? We wouldn't know. So like these different things, right? So for example, Isaac Newton said 800,000 years ago, 800 or 1,000 years ago, that gravity is basically a pull that is created by a mass, right? And then Einstein came along and said, no, it's a push and not a pull. It's some bend in some gravitational wave or some nonsense. So now the common accepted fact that gravity is not a pull and it's a push, right?
Yeah.
That is created by the mass. So like, it's very, so these ideals, these beliefs are meant to be changed. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So we need to adopt as we go along. As Sri Lankans, we need to be open to change, but we need to draw the line. Like, right, there needs to be a balance. I think balance is the key thing to anything in this life, right? You need to, so balance, what I mean as balance in this case is preserving your beliefs, your culture, but also being okay with this. Do me.
Yeah.
What's he saying?
Ado, sorry I couldn't make it today.
And the reason?
No, yes,
he hasn't said. Okay, no worries. Right, so do me forever interrupting us from the afterlife.
Dead grave also the bugger is tell.
Anyway, so yeah, so I forgot the last topic I was talking about, but like the overall topic is basically it's very hard to bring these different group identities together, and like as Sri Lankans, we are certainly changing. We are certainly, you know, reinventing our ideals and beliefs, which is a good thing. And for Sri Lankans, I don't see that happening instantly, like it happened in Bangkok or like in other countries, right? Which is a good thing.
Yeah,
I think it
works both ways, as you said.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's happening gradually, I feel like it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know where we'll end up, but like I said, there needs to be a balance.
And Masan, we have to also realize that, I mean, this might sound like cliche, but we are an island, right? And we have had advantages and disadvantages because we are an island. I'm not talking about the geopolitics or anything like that. Simply because we are an island, sometimes we get late to receive certain things, certain ideas, and we are always looking up to India, and then India seems to be our like a guiding light, and then from movies to music to the culture that we follow to religions that we have come from our big brother India, right? And again, two sides, good or bad, but that whole idea of being an island has isolated us in a way, and we only have that filtration. We are getting everything from India. And when we look at the West, and for example, if we take something that is happening in Europe or even like right above us in the European zone, that would make us a bit think a bit, and then it would be alien to us if we adopt a policy from Europe or but we seem to be okay with adopting things that are coming from the East. We seem to be okay with things that are happening. I mean, in fact, we tried to bring a prince from Thailand back in the day and do like this is coming from way back in the history. So we have been comfortable with this side of the world, with China, Thailand, Myanmar, and all that. We have been comfortable. But as soon as the West has also given those reasons to people like us. I mean, this whole colonizing and all of that has put that in that absolute fear, which is understandable. But is it happening now? Because, for example, what is interesting is something we had discussed at office, and this was a theory that a person from office came up with, that it was based on facts and figures, that India is not looking at a very sort of a non-aligned policy, but looking at a work with anyone who has the ability to get what we want done policy. Okay. So if they want to get something done with it's warm now, no, sorry. Get something done with China, they would work with China. If they want to get something done with Sri Lanka, they would. If we want to get something done with Pakistan, they would. That whole idea in the history where we don't work with Pakistan, we don't work with China is now not there anymore. Right. When will we go there? And then will that result in a more open-minded culture, a more open-minded society? And now this whole cultural barrier, right? We touched upon this last week as well, because we are talking about this free speech nonsense. Can a normal human being in Sri Lanka say what that person has to say without being judged? No.
No, hell no.
Can that person do that in USA? No. He or she will be judged, irrelevant. Right? And then
but then there are certain things that a person in the US might not judge you for, that Sri Lankan will judge you for.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
there are these cultural barriers, right? That's what we were trying to get at. And then that would mean that those cultural barriers have to be deleted. Is that what it means? Or does it mean that we have to look beyond those barriers? You'll be like, okay, this social norm, this social barrier is here. This is bad. But we as a generation will look beyond it and realize, okay, this is a thing in the past. Okay, this is there in the 90s. Okay, but are we educated enough? Right? Or are the people who will come after us educated enough? Or the people before us educated enough to make that decision?
So this again is, I mean, we are kind of running around the main topic of our discussion today, and no, not do me, free speech. So it again, boils down to it's free speech, Mashang. I mean, it boils down to free speech. I mean, like, these are the discussions, the conversations that we need to have as Sri Lankans, right? And in order to have these discussions, obviously, we need free speech. We need people who would be okay to have these conversations without being offended. Simple as that, right? I think another reason as to why it's okay to risk being offensive is a person is never right in his debate on the first try. Right?
Absolutely.
People always, I've noticed people correcting themselves even during a debate as the discussion goes along, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, I might say something controversial like that I am pro-choice when it comes to abortion, right? And then 20 minutes later, I might receive some new information, right? Let's say some statistic or, right, maybe I speak to one of my cousins who's a girl, and then she explains the hardship she went through, and then, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I say, no, I'm pro-life, right? So,
depends on your level of education.
Ideals and these norms and these different things they are meant to change, and in order to change those things, we need to have free speech. And having free speech is basically taking the risk of offending another person. That's what I'm saying, right? Anyway, coming back to your topic, what you asked me, right? Sri Lanka is most definitely ready to talk on certain things and most definitely not ready to talk of other things, right? But I think our generation and younger, we are open to a lot of things that our parents and the older generations aren't. So I think we are at liberty now to talk, like as we are doing right now, to talk about all these sensitive issues. I mean, like, these issues are sensitive for a reason, and it's because it's important and it should be discussed and it should be changed, right? I mean, if not, it wouldn't be sensitive at all, right? It's the important topics, the relevant, the pertinent topics that are sensitive in the first place, right? So, and these exactly are the topics that we should talk about, as we are rightly doing right now.
And if I'm to ask you this, what is stopping us from talking about this right now, at this moment?
Like you said, I feel like we are afraid that people will judge us. It can be our peers, it can be our parents, it can be Sri Lanka, the government, it can be whoever, right? I think it's that prevalent fear of being judged for talking about these topics. And for some people, I feel like it's not knowing enough about these topics that's stopping them from talking about it.
Which is fair.
Which is fine. But like I said, like, even the two of us, even if you are a freaking professor, right? Even if you have like double degrees or triple or quadruple, it doesn't really matter. You will still change your opinion eventually in time, right? So, like, what you say now might be different tomorrow. So it's fine to make that error. As long as we are having a healthy discussion. We might, like, for example, if we were having a debate, if this was not a discussion, if this was a debate, and we were talking about free speech, and you were opposing and I was proposing free speech, I might completely go out of this debate changing my mind because I was convinced of something you said, and that's perfectly fine. Or the other way around, right? The important thing is to make it happen,
right?
To gather and talk about these, like, core values, these principal values. That's the way I see it. I mean, shouldn't that be the first thing we do, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, people make mistakes. I might not know shit about a certain topic, but I'm still willing to learn. I'm still willing to talk about it, right? And so one of the things that I really like about the Joe Rogan podcast, every person that he brings in, he genuinely wants to know the answer, right? Every single question that he asks was not, like premeditated. It was not planned.
Right.
It was just in the moment because he wanted to genuinely know the answer, because he doesn't, right? Now see, Joe Rogan is not a classical intellectual, right? Like you and I. He's a freaking UFC fighter, he's an actor, he's a comedian, he's been all around, right? But he reads a lot, so he knows his fair share of things. But the thing that I really like about him is he genuinely wants to learn from these different people, and there are so many different people from very different fields, different areas of focus that come on his show, like everyone from Elon Musk to like
actors to
porn stars to like you name it, right? So even non-popular, like ordinary characters like you and me show up once in a while, right? So I like that. I like that distinction. Diversity, exactly, right? That's the word I was looking for. So I mean, that's kind of the thing that I was.
Why is Deepika going? Why is Deepika leaving?
Deepika has left us. Are we doomed?
To be a doom, technically.
Okay, I hope that's right. But that's fine. Let's continue. So initially, that was kind of the idea that I was looking forward to with the Thinking Hat. I wanted people on our show who will change the way that I think on certain topics, right?
Absolutely.
And I want to change. I genuinely want to change, because I know for a fact that I don't know enough and I don't know the right thing on certain topics. For example, like this free choice and pro-life and pro-choice decision. I've been rattling it in my head for the last 5 years. I don't know which side I've joined.
You're on,
Right? So I still don't know. I'm still lost.
Yeah.
So I'm still looking for someone to convince me, but I haven't got there yet. So these are the important topics that we need to discuss. And it's simple as that. Just meet up and talk about these topics, and then share your opinion with the world and let them decide, right? A person might totally disagree with you, but that's perfectly all right, as long as both the parties just go out of that particular discussion with information in their head. So what I'm saying is discuss these topics, right? Talk about them. That's the most important thing. Meet up and talk about them with your friends, with your peers. It doesn't matter. You don't have to necessarily do a podcast like The Thinking Hat. You can just meet up, like talk about it, right? It doesn't. I mean, if it's important, talk about it. Just don't stay silent.
Bring it out, and then and I think we are out of time. And next time when we meet, hopefully we'll have me and someone else also. We usually suggest a topic for the next time, but we don't end up doing it, but we'll suggest anyway. I was thinking of talking about sleeping patterns, why sleeping is important.
That's
it was a suggestion.
That's interesting.
I mean
I know my fair share about REM, rapid eye movement. I mean, that's fine.
We'll talk to.
We don't necessarily have to stick to political or those type of topics. I mean, we can talk about bloody thing. We can talk about sex, like you said, if you want to, right? It's our bloody show. It's a podcast on YouTube. We can talk about any shit we want.
And we are on YouTube, obviously, on Thinking Hat. You can look us up there. What? Look us up there.
Look us up.
And then what? Subscribe. See, this is why we needed a technical guy.
So you know me, I use reverse psychology. So don't subscribe. Don't look us up.
Look us up.
Or don't look us up. Look up us. Right. So and definitely don't subscribe. It's a shitty show.
No subscribe.
We're not making sense. Right.
All right. So it was good to
not have Dumi here.
Not have Dumi here. Cool shit. Right. See you again another day.
See you guys.